Great. So, as Fabiola said, I'm Ellen Franzenberg, Director of Secretariat Operations at the World Food Prize. I'm really excited to talk to you today about nominations for the World Food Prize and the Borlaug Field Award. So, as you can see, this is my contact information. If you need to call or email me at all after the presentation is over, you can certainly do that if you have further questions, but we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation as well for you to ask any questions you need answered. So on the first slide, we have the World Food Prize is a $250,000 award that is presented to an individual who has made a significant achievement in increasing the quality, quantity, availability of, or access to food in the world. So it was begun, on the next slide you can see it was begun by Dr. Norman Borlaug, who is the father of the Green Revolution, and he won the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize for his work breeding wheat and with the Green Revolution. And after he won the Peace Prize, he thought there really ought to be a prize of the same kind of stature for food and agriculture. So he founded the World Food Prize to respond to that. So on the next slide, you can see in Iowa, this is the Iowa State Capitol building in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where we present the World Food Prize to our laureate each year. So on the next slide, you can see a representation of the diversity of our laureates, a little orange dot for each place where a laureate comes from. So we have a breadth of laureates, not only from different world regions, but also from different fields of work. So if you've been on our website, you've probably seen the big long list of fields in which the World Food Prize can be awarded to an individual. And there's quite a few of them, from animal science and plant breeding all the way to economics and policy. So there's every part of the food system should be represented, even the ones that we haven't thought of yet. So plenty of space for anyone to be nominated. So on the next slide, we have just an example of some of our past laureates. Our first laureate, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who with Norman Borlaug was the father of the Green Revolution in India. And our first woman laureate, Dr. Evangelina Villegas, who was honored for developing quality protein maize. And on the next slide, we have Dr. Hans Herren, who was honored for developing biological control methods for insect pests. Dr. Pedro Sanchez, who is honored for his developments in soil health and fertility. Catherine Bertini, who was honored for her work with the World Food Program and increasing food relief efforts for emergency situations. And Dr. Gabisa Ijeda, who is the chair of our selection committee now, and he was our 2009 laureate and honored for his work in breeding striga-resistant sorghum. So you can kind of see just a small sample of the different fields that we honor laureates in. So for the criteria, the prize is intended to be awarded to one person, but I know that now in today's world, we do work in teams. So we do allow nominations of 2 or more people, but you really need to make sure that the documentation for both individuals in the team that you're nominating is very good and really spells out how each individual contributed to the achievement that they're being nominated for. So the achievement has to increase the quantity, quality, availability of, or access to food in the world. It can be a global or multinational or a national impact. And like I said before, any point in the food system. So there are lots of different fields that a person can be nominated for. So on the next slide, we have our criteria for our nominators. So any organization may submit a nomination. This can be an academic or a research institution, public or private organization, a government unit, a corporate entity or business, and this nomination must be endorsed by a senior official of the nominating organization. So in the case of a corporate entity or business, that might be the president or the CEO, or for an academic or research institution, this might be the director or the president or the dean of the college. So that would be, those are examples of what we mean by a senior official. So the next step would be the documentation. So the documentation, we'll get into more details in a little bit here, but basically it needs to tell us all about the nominee's achievement and demonstrate the impact that the nominee's achievement has had so far or is expected to have. And so the important thing is to remember to make the documentation really about the nominee. A lot of nominees have great projects, or they're the founder or leader of an organization. And so it's tempting to make the documentation be about that project or about that foundation or institution instead of about the individual, about the nominee. But it's really important to detail the innovation or the discovery that the nominee has made that project or that organization so successful or impactful. So part of demonstrating the achievement and impact would be to include statistics and numbers and other evidence of the impact of the nominee's achievement. So this is going to be really different depending on the field that the nominee is in. So, for example, a plant breeder would have completely different record of impact than somebody who is in economics or policy. So it's kind of up to the nominator how they show the impact of the achievement. So some of the questions to think about when putting together the documentation would include what actions did the nominee take to achieve the achievement or what they did? How was food quantity, quality, or availability impacted as a result of those actions that the nominee took? Who was impacted? What region of the world was impacted? What kind of change occurred as a result? So those are the kinds of things that you'd think about including in the documentation. So the first part that we ask for in the documentation is the contact information for the nominator. So this would be, the nominator would be the person, the senior official of the organization that is nominating the person. So the senior official would be considered the nominator. You can also include contact information for the person who is putting together the nomination if that's a different person from the person who is the nominator. So then there's also the nominee contact information and basic biographical information, which would include a CV and a photo. And then the synopsis is basically just a 150-word paragraph that explains why this person is being nominated for the World Food Prize. So just a simple summation. So the next slide, we'll talk about the two statements that we require for a nomination, the statement of achievement and the statement of impact. So each of these statements can be up to 2 pages long. And the statement of achievement is going to be where you talk about the nominees' actions. So what they did, the innovations they made, or the discoveries that they made, and just the actions that they took to get to where they are. And the statement of impact is going to be more focused on what the impact was of the nominee's actions. So the nominee's achievement had an impact on, who, what, where, and this is where you would probably include more of those statistics or evidence of the impact here in this statement of impact. So the next thing that we ask for is letters of recommendation. So the nomination letter is a letter from a nominator. So the nominator would be, again, as I said, the senior official in the organization that's nominating the nominee. So it can be 1 or 2 pages, ideally on letterhead, signed and dated like any regular letter. And then we also require 2 seconding letters from 2 different people who are outside of the nominating organization. So this should be ideally from people who know about the nominee's work and can talk about it and attest to it. So that can include additional details about the nominee, whatever the nominator and the writer of the letter thinks would be appropriate for the selection committee to know. So again, it would be on letterhead, signed and dated. Please include the writer's name and their position and organization. We don't require the contact information necessarily of the seconding nominators, but we would at least like to know who they are. So, the next slide, we'll talk about supporting documents. So our supporting documents are optional. You don't have to submit supporting documents, but sometimes if there are particular articles or publications that are by or about the nominee, the nominator might want to include them if they're particularly illustrative of the nominee's impact or achievement. So if it's something that really shows the attention that should be paid to this achievement or the impact that has been made, you might consider including some publications or articles about that. You can also submit additional seconding letters, so supporting letters, in the supporting documents category if you have more than 2 supporting letters. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the nomination process. So this year, our deadline is May 1st. So this is the deadline to submit nominations. However, we do understand that it has been a crazy year so far, and everybody is pretty busy and their minds are all occupied with other things happening right now. So extensions are available for this May 1st deadline. So if you feel that you can't get your nominations submitted by May 1st, just send me an email, give me a call, and we can extend the deadline. So once a nomination is submitted, it is eligible for 3 years. So nominations that are submitted this year will still be eligible for consideration through 2022. And there's no requirement to submit updates in order for the nomination to remain eligible for those 3 years, but we do welcome updates if you have them during that 3-year period. After the nomination has expired, gone out of eligibility after those 3 years, if it hasn't been chosen yet, you're welcome to resubmit the nomination after 3 years, completely refresh the nomination. So then this year in the fall, the selection committee will choose the next recipient of the World Food Prize, and the Council of Advisors of the World Food Prize Foundation ratifies the choice of the selection committee. And then in early 2021, we'll notify the recipient, and May, June-ish, early summer, we'll have the announcement of the laureate, and then in October, we will award the prize to the laureate. So it's a bit of a long process. For nominations that come in this year, they're actually being considered for next year's World Food Prize. This year, we've already selected, this year for 2020, the 2020 World Food Prize, we've already selected the laureate, and we'll be announcing that laureate in May or June, and then in 2020, or in October 2020, we will then be awarding the prize. So that's the basic process. So the next slide just is a picture of the award ceremony for the World Food Prize inside the Iowa State Capitol in October. And I also want to talk briefly on the next slide about the Borlaug Field Award, which is a $10,000 award that has been endowed by the Rockefeller Foundation and is meant to be given to a researcher, extension agent, development professional who is under the age of 40. So for younger professional in food and agriculture. So this award recognizes a science-based achievement by an individual who demonstrates or who follows in the footsteps of Norman Borlaug. So a person who is kind of following in Norman Borlaug's footsteps in the fight to end hunger, malnutrition, and poverty. So in the same way, there are a lot of different fields that this award can be given in. This one is due June 15th. Unfortunately, we cannot issue extensions for the Borlaug Field Award. June 15th is a hard deadline. This one will also be awarded in October in Iowa, around the same time as the World Food Prize. And nominations for this year are being considered for this year, for 2020. So it doesn't have the long nominations process that the World Food Prize does. Nominations this year will be considered for the Borlaug Field Award 2020. All right, so this concludes the presentation about nominations. You can see here on the last slide our website, worldfoodprize.org/nominate, which is where you would go to submit a nomination and to get more information about nominations, the criteria, and the documentation, and also my contact information, my email and phone number. So if you have any questions after the presentation has concluded, you can definitely contact me there. But if you have any questions for me right now that I can answer, I think that's what we'll do. We'll open it up for questions.